Okay, now that we figured out that our mains are good, all right? They're within wherever Clevite, I talked to you about it, wherever Clevite tells you they're supposed to be within clearance. Mine is 2.44175, we talked about it. So now we know that the mains are all torqued down to specification, 1 through 5. We checked it with the dial bore gauge. They're all 2.44175 within a half a thousandths of each other. You know, it ended up being a half a thousandths under, but it's all even. So then, what you have to do is you have to take your crankshaft and you have to mic the mains on the crankshaft. 1 through 5 on your crankshaft. And once you mic the crankshaft, you have to set the dial bore gauge, this again, to whatever number 1 main is on the crankshaft to check number 1 main cap on the block. All right, so you're going to put the bearings in. Now, here's the deal with the bearings is, you know, you see it on TV and they go, well, you checked our clearances and we magically put them in and you came up with 2.2 and a half thousandths, or everything's at 2.2 thousandths and everything's great. Well, not in the real world. That's just on TV. So in the real world, you have to mic the mains on the crank, write them down on a piece of paper, exactly what they are. If they're different from each other, you have to write it down. You know, so you write what your mains read, 1 through 5. So then you get a set of Clevite. I want to give you the part number. I don't know if you can read it or not, but it's the part number is MS 590 HK. All right. Each one of those letters represents something. The H stands for high performance, and the K stands for tri-armor coating. Okay, this is for a small block Ford 302, not anything else. MS 590 HK. That's a standard size bearing. Okay, so you put the bearings in the block, upper and lower. You torque the mains all down. You mic out your crankshaft. What the crankshaft is, you wrote it down on a piece of paper, and then you take your outside mic, which you've already mic'd the crankshaft up. You set your dial bore gauge up the same as the crankshaft, and then you read your clearance in your mains. All right, so the deal is on the main bearings, the part number that I gave you, they also have MS 590 HK, HXK. So it's MS 590 HXK. All right. Remember the one I gave you before was just HK. Well, this set is XK. The X stands for 1/1000ths more extra oil clearance than a standard bearing. So you got a set of standards and you got a set of X bearings. Okay, so put the standards in first. Now say you got 1.5 thousandths on your standards for oil bore clearances. You need an extra 0.5 thousandths. The X's will give you 1/1000ths. Now if you take the lower half of the X and the upper half of the standard, will give you a 0.5 thousandths. So for each half is basically 0.5 thousandths. Pretty easy to remember. So if you had 1.5 and you need an extra 0.5 thousandths, you take the lower half of the X, you put it in the cap, torque it down, and the dial bore gauge should show you the extra half a thousandths that you need. And it's not like Harry Potter, abracadabra, and your clearances are good. No, you got to work at it. You got to figure out where your clearances are at. You got to either add, a whole upper and lower half. If you only got 1/1000ths, and you got to put in the X bearings to get the extra thousandths in there. So, and what I like to do is, because I use the X lower halves or sometimes the standard lower halves, and I kind of mix and match them to get where I want the block at. And this is an aluminum block. So aluminum block, when it heats up, it expands faster than steel. So my clearances, and this is my clearances, I'm not saying to set your block up at my clearances, but what I'm shooting for is I'm shooting for 2/1000ths cold. That's at whatever the garage temperature is in here, probably about 55. When I torque this down, I put my mains in, I torque it down, I want to shoot for 2/1000ths cold on my mains. So when the block reaches 180 degrees, I'm at 2.5, 2.7, at least 2.5, because they loosen up pretty good. Right now, the way I got it set, my smallest clearance, number 3, it's at 1.7. My biggest is about 2.1. So I'm within reason. I'm right where I want to be. I don't like the 1.7's a little tight, but we'll deal with it. Let's try armor coating, be all right. So anyways, that's what you do with the aluminum block. I'm shooting for 2. I got anywhere between 1.7 and 2.1, 2.2. No, more like I got actually 1.7 to 2. My biggest is 2. Sorry, I take that back. 1.7 to 2. My biggest is 2. So, anyways, that's the deal with the oil bore clearances. I hope I made it clear enough. Like I said, the Cleveite MS 590 HK, that's your standard. Tri-armor coating, that's the best bearings you can buy, is MS 590 HK. H stands for high performance, K stands for tri-armor coating. And you also need, probably, start out with the standards, and then if it's too tight, you're going to need an MS 590 HXK. Alright, and that'll give you 1/1000ths. If you're just take the standard bearing out and put the X's in, both the upper and lower half of the X, it's going to give you an extra 1/1000ths clearance. Remember, it's going to give 1/1000ths more, not less. A lot of guys confuse it. Anyway, so that's the deal on the mains. I'll get back to you on what we're going to do next. Hello again. I wanted to mention this when I was talking about these MS 590 HKs, and that's a standard, and 590 HXK. It doesn't matter which half you take. You could take the upper half of the X's or the lower half of the X's, and each half's going to give you 1/1000. So I just want to make that clear that it doesn't matter what half if you need a half a thousandths, it doesn't matter if you take an upper half or lower half. I just want to clarify that. I didn't want to confuse anybody. All right. Okay, so now that we talked about the main clearances, the oil bore clearances on your mains, now we're going to talk about thrust. The thrust bearing, when I put it together, I put the crankshaft in and I checked my thrust. I got 3. I'm looking for about at least 5. 5 would be good. So I think I use the usually what I do is I mark my bearings with a Sharpie. I'll mark what number they are, 1 through 5, and then for the standards I mark it with an S, and for the ones that are X's, the ones that have the bigger clearance, I put an X on them. So when I go and look at the block, I can look at it and figure out what's the X and what's the standards. So I'm not confused on what's going on. So anyways, the thrust, when I used the standard on a lower and an X on an upper, because that's the way it ended up being, the halves didn't quite line up the way they should. What it looks like is, you got to look at both sides. You got to look at the front, you look at the back, and see where they're lined up. And my lower half is just a little bit thicker than my upper half, both front and the back side. So this is things you got to look at. So what I need to do is I need to take the lower half out because it looks like it's a little wider, and I'll mic it, make sure. I'll mic it with an outside micrometer and see just how much bigger it is than the upper. I mean, I'm sure it's probably like maybe 1,000, maybe 2,000, but that's all I need. So what I'll do is I'll mic it out and see if they're even, see where they're at. Looking at it, like I said, the lower looks a little bigger. And then what I'll do is I'll take some 800 sandpaper, 800 grit, and I put it on a flat piece of glass, and I will sand probably the lower because it's bigger a little bit, real carefully in circles, you know. So spray some WD-40 on the sandpaper. Sandpaper's on a flat piece of glass. Take the lower half of the bearing and very carefully I will sand it in circles. I'll try to show you if I can. I got a setup for that. All right. Okay, it's John again. We have our main bearing here. You can see that this is the lower half. I got an X on it, and the upper half has got an S on it. So the upper half is the lower half's always got a slot in it. So the lower half is a standard, the upper half is an X. So that's what I'm using to get the clearance. Anyway, so I don't have enough thrust, so I got the sandpaper here, and I got my piece of glass here. See the glass there? And I got some mineral spirits here. It's got a little bit of oil in with it. And so I just, well, you got to make sure this bearing is sitting flat, that both halves are flat. I got a little clamp here. The clamp's not super tight, but it's tight. Well, the most important thing is make sure that both halves are flat. So you got to, you know, take some time and make sure that, you know, look at the two ends where they come together. Make sure that they're you know, that they're even. That's the biggest thing here. They're even. Sandpaper, mineral spirits, and then circular motions, just like that. Then look at it. Make sure that you don't have any high spots. They're both sanding evenly. Gotta be even. And circular motions, even. Keeping equal pressure on it. You know, you gotta try to keep the pressure real equal. And flip it over the other side. I should be counting how much time I spent on one side or the other, counting my circles when I'm not. I'm paying more attention to the camera. And I should be paying more attention to counting my circles, how many circles on each side. But anyways, this will probably come in pretty fast, and if I take off too much, then I'm really in trouble, because I'm not going to buy another set of bearings because I took off too much. So I'm going to sneak up on it. I want to talk about latex gloves. You always have to put on latex gloves, or nitrate gloves if you're allergic to latex, or they got vinyl gloves. But you always have to wear gloves anytime you're dealing with any kind of chemical or any of this stuff. All this stuff is bad news. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be well, you could be waxing your car. The wax and the cleaner and the wax ain't good for you. No way. So you always got to wear gloves. As soon as you step in the garage, put on your gloves, because it'll get into your blood, and then who knows what else could develop from there. Same thing if you're painting. You got to put on a paint mask. And I mean, I'm not talking about one of them dust masks. I'm talking about the charcoal canisters. If you can smell the fumes, it's killing you. So, all right, so we're gonna put the bearing back in the block, and we're gonna torque down the number 3 cap. After we put the crankshaft in, and then we're gonna set up the dowel bore gauge and see what we got for thrust.